we talk a lot about creating that trust and understanding the other person's point of view. And that's important with these collaborative project delivery methods. Even design build, design assist, CM at risk, those are all more collaborative project delivery that again, you have to have these skills to be successful.
Welcome to Spill the Ink, a podcast by Reputation Inc., where we feature experts in growth and brand visibility for law firms and architecture, engineering, and construction firms. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Calcote King. I'm your host, and I'm also the principal and president of Reputation Inc. We're a public relations and content marketing agency for architecture, engineering, and construction firms and other professional services firms. To learn more, go to rep-inc, that's inc with a K.com. So regardless of your job title, if you work in the AEC industry, you're expected to collaborate with other people to deliver successful projects. But what's the secret to building high-performing teams where people feel valued and motivated from beginning to end? So in today's Spill the Ink episode, we're going to talk about emotional intelligence and how it impacts culture and success in AEC firms. So, and I have the perfect guest to talk to me about this topic. So for more than 20 years, Brent Darnell has been teaching industry professionals how to build critical people skills and leverage emotional intelligence to improve their leadership, projects, and operations. He's the owner of Brent Darnell International, an author and a seasoned speaker. So his programs and courses on emotional intelligence span the globe and have helped companies of all sizes. So welcome to the show, Brent.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this. So one, I'd like, if you don't mind, just I gave that brief intro, but sort of how did you get into this niche area in terms of teaching these people skills and emotional intelligence in the architecture, engineering, and construction industry?
Well, first of all, I'm a construction guy. I grew up in the construction business. My dad started as a carpenter, and we moved around a lot to different projects. So I grew up in the industry, and then I went to Georgia Tech. I graduated as a mechanical engineer. So I have that background as well, and started mostly MEP coordination and then got into project management. And I did that for about 20 years.
Okay.
And then I had this opportunity. I was working for Skanska at the time, big Swedish contractor, and they wanted me to run this leadership program for them out of Sweden and I did that for a couple of years. It was really an amazing program. And at the end of the 2 years, they said, okay, we're doing something else, go back to Atlanta. And that they weren't really interested in the leadership stuff. This was in 2001. So they just said, we want you to go manage projects again. And I really didn't want to do that. So I started my own business. I saw a need there. We used emotional intelligence the second year of this leadership program that we did. And it was amazing. And it's something that it really resonated with me. So I started my own business January 2002, and I've been doing this ever since and never looked back. It's had its ups and downs, but mostly, if you see where the industry's gone from 2000, early 2000s, it's become much more collaborative, much more relationship driven, right, with lean and IPD and all these collaborative project delivery methods. So there's a different set of skills that are needed. So it's come to where these have to have skills, not just, wow, it'd be nice to have those, but you have to have them to create great projects now.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question is what are the particular challenges that the AEC faces that make emotional intelligence and people skills so important?
Well, look at the collaborative nature. It's no longer, what's the percentage? I'm wondering on just design, bid, build projects. They're right. They're really diminishing. It's all about relationships and trust and collaboration and sharing risk and sharing reward, and that takes all the stuff we're talking about. That takes people skills. It takes emotional intelligence. It takes self-awareness and empathy and how to communicate and connect and create that trust in a really tangible, real way. You know, we talk a lot about creating that trust and understanding the other person's point of view, and that's important with these collaborative project delivery methods. Even, I mean, even design build, design assist, CM at risk, those are all more collaborative project delivery that again, you have to have these skills to be successful.
Right. Yeah. And I can imagine it's becoming more top of mind with owners as well as they struggle with, the labor shortage, recruiting, keeping the best people. Do you often hear that? Do they start with hey, how do I keep the best people that I have, and how do I attract the right people? Is that often a goal that owners are talking to you about?
Totally. To me, there are three main areas where this whole human connection, respect for people, emotional intelligence comes into play. It's workforce development. How do you attract and retain great people? How do you get younger people to come into the industry? Then we've also got diversity, inclusion, equity, belonging. That's another issue that's driven by ability to connect, ability to for that human connection and respect for each other, and then I think the mental health component as well. It's the ability for these hyper masculine work environments and hyper masculine folks to be vulnerable and to really overcome that stigma around mental health and well-being. And all three of those to me, they're fundamentally, the foundation is emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
The other thing we talk a lot about in these programs that we do is peak performance, peak mental, physical, emotional performance, well-being. So we talk a lot about nutrition and stress and sleep and exercise and how you manage all that with these crazy work schedules to have your peak level of mental, physical, and emotional performance and longevity. You don't want to develop some autoimmune disease or mental health issue that's going to force you to not be able to work in this industry.
Yeah, so it's interesting you brought up mental health. So we work, my company focuses on two industries, AEC being one, and law firms being the other. And I hear mental health is widely discussed in the legal industry. I think that stems from lawyers having some of the highest depression and suicide rates. It's been a known factor. I don't hear it talked about as often in the AEC industry. Do you think that's changing with COVID and all the attention around mental health? And how can AEC firms help employees with this issue?
Right, it is changing. There's a couple of people that come to my mind: Cal Beyer, Sally Spencer Thomas. They're really out there talking about this and reducing the stigma around it. But we have the second highest suicide rate of any industry.
Wow.
Construction.
Wow.
Suicide kills 5 times more people than all construction-related accidental deaths.
Wow.
So it's a problem. It's a big issue. And so we have to start talking about it, number one. And then, like you said, we have to give the resources to the companies to be able to support those folks that are struggling. Yeah. And there's an organization called Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention. It's the website is preventconstructionsuicide.com. There you can do risk assessments there and get collateral material and all the hotlines and to give to people and start the discussion. We've created a program we call Primal Safety, which focuses on all these lifestyle choices and emotional intelligence and human connection. And we've created something called the Primal Safety Coloring Book, which it's a really cool coloring book. And this kid, they leave him at grandpa's and the whole family works in construction, and it shows how they stay safe throughout their day. But it also mentions things like mental health and nutrition and sleep and all those things. And at the end of the day, they come home safely to the kid. Well, it's in Spanish and English. And all of our profits from that goes to the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention.
That's great. What are some of the factors that lead to the construction industry having some of the second highest suicide rate?
Well, I think the demographics are there. First of all, it's a really highly stressful job. There's a lot of uncertainty around pay. And if you have a bunch of bad weather, maybe you don't get paid. there's no benefit. There's very little benefits unless you're in a union environment. There's
Yeah.
very little vacation, healthcare, employee assistance programs. We just don't have the support for our workers. They become commoditized, and they're usually lower income. They don't make the money that we probably should be paying them. So they're struggling. They may be working other jobs. They may not be getting enough sleep. That plus the hypermasculine work environment, can't be vulnerable, can't ask for help, can't be struggling. Right. Plus there's a typical emotional profile for most field people and superintendents. It's really high assertiveness and independence, which you would imagine to be true.
Yeah.
But lower emotional self-awareness, lower empathy skills. So think about it that way. You're not understanding your own feelings, but also you don't understand the feelings of others. So you really you don't have the ways of looking at those nuanced changes in people that may indicate mental health issues and have those discussions with them, because you just don't have the skills to be able to do that. So it's a perfect storm.
Sense. Yeah, perfect storm. That's what I was thinking. Yeah, that creates that problem. I saw some interesting. You had some questions on your website that were kind of fascinating to me. That I think the lead was how many of these questions have you asked yourself? And I know you're kind of talking to that AEC firm leader, but one of them was, why is our company filled with middle-aged white guys? Where are the women and minorities? Right. And tell me a little bit how that plays into emotional intelligence and people skills, and how you help firms with that.
Well, first of all, I love middle-aged white guys. I am a middle-aged white guy. It's not a slam on middle-aged white guys. It's just it's a reality of the industry. And I think it comes from, again, that typical profile: lower self-awareness, lower empathy. We're not as good at that inclusion part, that belonging part, because it's a very transactional, results-driven industry. And nothing, again, these aren't bad people. They just don't have those skills honed to the degree where they can connect with others as well as they could. And that's what this training does. It allows them, we can improve things like self-awareness and empathy skills that creates better human connection, that creates more of a connection with other humans. And that way you can start having those discussions and talking to people, and you can, create a more inclusive work environment and really start talking to folks about, and see, to me, that the lack of women and people of color in the industry is sort of a symptom of a bigger issue of, we just like to be around people that are like us, which is social identity theory. That's just a fact. But also for the industry, it is about those technical abilities, those knowing the technical ability and knowledge to be able to be a good builder and build a project. And the human side sort of takes a back seat. Well, if we're going to really be inclusive and really create that sense of belonging, we have to put the human stuff up front. Yeah. And that's what this work does. It sort of flips that. And I always talk about every interaction is a human interaction. If you could start there and then get the results, whatever results you need, but start with the human stuff.
Yeah, I can imagine that the fact that you are a middle-aged white guy helps a little bit to relate to a lot of the leaders, because that is kind of the demographic makeup, and that gives you some credibility. This isn't someone coming in that they think doesn't understand them or relate to them, so it helps you kind of open up that conversation in a way that someone with a different background might. So that's fascinating.
Yeah, it does. It really helps. And also what I've done is I've asked people to help me, women of color, LGBTQ folks that are in the industry. Tell me what your experience is. And then I've created a course around that. And we talk about, okay, let's recognize our biases and let's recognize those things, but let's not dwell on those things. Let's say, yeah, that's a fact. We all have these biases, but let's figure out how can we connect as humans better. That's the whole thrust of what I think we're going. We can't ignore those things. We have to have those discussions of, people of color and women in the industry have a different experience than me or a middle-aged white guy. And we have to recognize that and be able to address that in some way. But the recognition is the first step.
I talked to a diversity trainer who had this term he called OWLs, old white leaders. And he talked a lot about sort of making it safe for them too to have these conversations. Because I think, so, a lot of people are just scared they don't know, it feels like there's landmines everywhere. So they just avoid it altogether. And I thought that was a really intelligent approach to.
Absolutely. It's so true. There's a book out that's called White Fragility, and I think it's done more harm than good. I think the white guys are so afraid to make a mistake that they just tend to distance and say, I'm just not going to address this, because if I say the wrong thing, I can be canceled, I can be fired, and it happens, and it has happened. And yet we have to have those really difficult discussions to be able to move forward, I think. So it's a balance with that, but the white guys need help, and you have to tell them when something's inappropriate or that your feelings got hurt, or it's something that really upset you. We have to have those discussions if we're going to change behaviors. And if we never make a mistake, or we never bring that up that was a mistake, then nothing will change.
Right. Yeah. So let's say someone says, okay, I want to improve the emotional intelligence of my team. What would be the way you do that? What are some of the methods that you use, or the things that people learn?
Well, we use a couple of evaluations when we do a full-blown program. It's the EQI 2.0, which is one of the oldest emotional intelligence instruments on the planet. And it's a validated, peer-reviewed instrument, which a lot of these personality tests, they've never been validated scientifically. So that's where we start. And then we have something called the symptom survey, which is based on physical symptoms. It tells us how your body's working. So we look at the results of both of those evaluations, and then we see correlations all the time. So I give you an example. If we see something, what we call self-sacrifice in the emotional side, which is really high empathy and lower assertiveness, sort of the opposite of that alpha male thing.
Right.
We call that self-sacrifice, tendency to put other people's needs ahead of your own, trouble setting limits and boundaries, trouble saying no to people. We almost always see sugar handling as an issue, which means they tend to be carboholics or sugarholics.
Ah, interesting.
So we work on both of those areas. So we'll work on the physical stuff and nutrition and all the things we know that we should be doing. But then for a self-sacrificer, we'll also work on their assertiveness and being more clear in communication and setting some limits and boundaries. So we tend to work on both. And by the way, if anybody wants to, we've created a free test that has both of those tests on it. If they go to brentdarnell.com/resources, you can download it's called the Geist EI Test and Symptom Survey.
Interesting.
And you can take it and see where you are. It automatically graphs your results and tells you what profiles it sees for the emotional and the physical.
And I imagine we've done personality tests with my team in the past. And I would imagine a lot of the benefit is one, self-awareness, learning more about yourself, but also just gaining that knowledge that people on your team have a different makeup and, react differently. Is that what you often see there?
Yes, and don't get me wrong, I'm not slamming personality tests. Anything that brings you better self-awareness is certainly worthwhile. A worthwhile endeavor. And that's one of the biggest benefits we see coming out of these programs, because all of our programs are most of what we do is a year-long process. So it really takes that to be able to create behavioral changes in people, because you can't develop empathy in a weekend or a half day or a lunch and learn. You have to have some application and coaching and follow up and reflection. And so it takes a long time to do that. So it's about understanding what those different emotional and physical competencies that you want to work on, and then we provide the resources to be able to do that. And that's where, again, over time, that awareness becomes behavioral change, because we always say awareness alone will not change behavior.
information
will not change behavior. If
Right.
that were true,
Yeah.
we would all be pretty awesome, I think.
Right. Absolutely. That's the truth. Yeah. So you're giving people information and then giving them tools to actually use that information and make changes.
Right. We do. We have tons of there are just activities that you put in for a development plan. We have daily application stuff, more long-term stuff, books, all kind of written and performance material, movies. We got apps and websites. I mean, people, have different proclivities toward how they want to learn. So we just give them a bunch of different options, and then they can start working on those areas. And over time, the behavior does shift and change.
How have you seen technology impacting emotional intelligence, relationship building, collaboration? Are you seeing technology impact that in any way?
It can be very good, but I've talked to a lot of tech companies about this. Sometimes technology enables you to hate people faster and with more anonymity.
Right.
That whole,
yeah.
So I mean, look at bullying and those kind of online things that take place. So I'd say those technologies and those project sharing and file sharing and collaborative tools are awesome. And they're much better if you start with the human connection part.
Right.
And see, here's the thing. I think some of these tech companies, they come in and they have these great tools, and then they fail, and they fail because of the human stuff, not because of the technology. And then the people using the technology say, well, that technology didn't work. Let's try another one,
Right.
And it has very little to do with the technology and everything to do with how you connect as humans.
Yeah, absolutely. What about safety? I thought that was interesting to see how emotional intelligence can impact safety. How does it? What's the correlation?
Yeah. So my theory, and this is just a theory, that if people care about each other and learn about each other's lives and families, they work safer naturally because they will be looking out for each other and correct each other. And, so we have in this primal safety coloring book at the end, we have, by the way, that's on the resources too. There's a whole list of 52, not the coloring book, but it's called the Primal Safety Toolbox Safety Topics. So it's not about PPE. It's not about tying off, but it's about how you connect as humans. So one of the exercises is pair up and tell somebody you don't know about your family, or pair up and tell a story about what it would be like if you didn't go home today. What would that look like? If somebody showed up at your family's door and say, I'm sorry, but Bob passed away today. He had an accident and he died. What would the consequences of that be? So it's those kind of things where we tap into emotional responses, because there's a philosopher named Ken Wilber who said, rules and regulations will only get you so far with changing people's behavior. Then you have to go to the next level, which is an emotional response to whatever your behaviors you're trying to change. So this gets into the behavioral aspect of how we connect with each other and looking out for each other. But then also we talk about lifestyle choices. What do you eat? What do you drink? How are you sleeping? Are you exercising? Are you managing your stress? So I give the example of a guy wakes up, he's hungover, he has a fight with his wife, he has a flat tire, he's late for work, he rushes in, he's pissed off at the world, he grabs a couple of Red Bulls and a couple of donuts and pops some cold medications or something to Vivarin or something to jack him up, and then that's your crane operator for the day.
Wow. Yeah, that is an impactful scenario. Yeah.
So we and not to tell people how to live their lives, but tell them the consequences of the choices that they're making in terms of their own personal safety and for the safety of others. And so we promote good food. Get those horrible food trucks off the site and bring something that's healthy in, and stop giving people frozen burritos that are microwaved for lunches, and get some good healthy food out there and talk to them about how they eat. And I don't know how many projects I've been to where there's a massive litter of a bunch of Monster energy drink and Red Bull cans. And if those guys are going on that's dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah, that's it seems obvious, but I can see how it's just an easily overlooked thing because it's just never been, it's probably
yeah,
how it's always been.
right.
So yeah, it's those kind of things. What about the other question that I saw on your site that was interesting to me is why can't we pass knowledge to our young people? How does emotional intelligence help with that?
Well, I always get the complaints of the baby boomers about the young people, and now they have
Hmm.
horrible work ethics and they're lazy and whatever, So I think there's a disconnect there, but I think it's an
Mm,
artificial disconnect. I do a session, I've done several keynotes of the generations, why we're not so different. I think
mm,
those generational things that people, some consultant came up with are totally made up. There's no research behind it. All the dates are arbitrary.
mm,
I think it's just made up. Now, there are
mm,
different preferences in communication, different preferences in use of technology. Those are real things. But in the end, people, I mean, if you look at something called self-determination theory, people want to feel like they belong. They want to learn and
mhm,
become masterful at something. They want to be connected in some way. And I think
mhm.
a lot of boomers think, oh, well, they want to be VP in 2 years, and that's impossible, and it'll take them 10 years to be a project manager. And I say, why? Why don't
Right.
you teach them everything you know and cut them loose and let them go?
Mhm.
I mean, our father said the same thing about us, that we're lazy and we don't have good work ethic and
Right.
all those things. It's not a generational issue. It's just
Yeah.
we always. I put up a quote from, our children are worse than we are, and our grandchildren will be even worse. And it's from like 2nd century BC. So this is nothing new.
Right.
This is, but I think it's a lot of it's made up in our heads, and we have to embrace that they do things differently, and teach them everything we know, identify
Yeah.
those high potentials, put them on the fast track. You know, back when it took you 10 years to become a PM, you probably had Lotus Notes and fax machines. Okay.
Right.
You didn't
Yeah.
have the power of the entire world and the knowledge of the entire world in your hand. So
Yeah.
things are different now. Access
Yeah.
to information is different now.
Mm.
We don't need to have those mentor mentee relationships necessarily in terms of passing on knowledge. What we have to do is, like I said, cut them loose and they'll figure it out. If I had a group of millennials in a room and said, hey, design me a pedestrian bridge that goes from here to here, you have an hour and a half, they would do it. They would find a
Yeah.
way to do that. They would access that information. They would get in a Reddit room. They would find some civil engineer in India, and I mean, they would figure it out. But
Yeah.
we don't let them, and we have this stigma around, you have to pay your dues, and it takes time to learn all this stuff. And my theory is, why do you
Yeah,
need to?
that's that. Yeah, it's a great point. Business works at a different pace now
Yes.
than it used to, and things are, yeah, technology has changed how fast we move, and how fast we learn certain things. So
Yeah.
yeah, I even struggle with that feeling that that difference between people 20 years younger than me. So I can understand that. Well,
Yeah,
this has been a, yeah, go ahead.
I think it's about, uh again, it's about human connection and creating that trust, and doing a mind dump and teach them everything and let them go. In fact, if you put a really young, maybe not fully really big experience, a high level of experience PM with a really good seasoned field person, like a good
Yeah.
foreman or superintendent, why why not?
Hmm.
But we say, oh, well, they're not ready for that. Well, just get them, put them out there and see how they do, and give them the
Yeah.
support when they need it. Right.
Yeah.
So
That's
that's my
great.
theory.
Love it. Well, this has been a really interesting conversation. I love that you are focused on such an important topic in an industry where I don't hear it as much, but I'm certainly going to dive into some of your resources and start educating myself a little bit more on this topic in this industry. So if people, if you can give everyone your website address so that, I think you said it earlier, is it Brent Darnell?
BrentDarnell.com with 2 L's
Great.
and Darnell. And also, I'll just throw out this. If you want to read my book, The People Profit Connection, which is about this emotional intelligence work for the industry, it's the subtitle is How to Transform the Future of Construction by Focusing on People. It's brentdarnell.com/people profit.
Love it.
All one
Great.
word, lowercase, people profit, and they can download the PDF of that book and put it on their reader.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Spill the Ink, a podcast by Reputation Inc. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.